Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone, and we need to have an emergency discussion about the Golden State Warriors. They started the season on fire. They're 12-3, one of the best teams in the Western Conference, and we're really silencing a lot of doubters that popped up throughout the summer. Me being one of those doubters. I had the Warriors on the edge of the play, and I can't remember if I had them as like a 10 or an 11, or it might have even been 12. I thought there was a real shot that they missed the play-in race entirely because last season they were a team that was barely in that race. They ultimately lost in their first play-in game, and then they lost Klay Thompson in this offseason, add some role players, sure, with like D'Anthony Melton and Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield, but none of them felt like they were going to make that big of a difference when compared to some of the other moves that were made in that same Western Conference, teams that got drastically better. Or the Warriors, I felt like kind of stagnated and didn't address the biggest issue that they had, which was the lack of a real second option, because last year, Steph tried to carry them for a majority of the season, and that's when they started hot like they did this year. But last year, they ultimately tailed off hard towards the back half of the season because Steph Curry tailed off hard because he's a 35-year-old point guard still trying to elevate an offense beyond what its real capabilities are, and he's one of the best players to ever do it, so he's capable of that for at least a few months. But you got to the end of the season and he just completely burnt out, which isn't surprising given the age and mileage on those legs and the lack of overall consistent talent around him. So I felt like going after Lauri Markkanen made a ton of sense to me. He was the guy that the Warriors really need to go out there and grab. There are also rumors about Paul George, which I didn't love as much because he's a little bit older, but even he, I felt like would have made sense for this Warriors team, but ultimately they weren't willing to part with the assets that would have acquired those players. Brandin Podziemski was one player they absolutely refused to give up under any circumstances. Kuminga was in some of those rumors, and even then they were still a little bit hesitant about trading him away. It was clear that the Warriors prioritized the young guys and just building out this team full of depth pieces over adding that second star, and for the first 15 or so games that worked. But recently, they've fallen apart. Over their last 10 games, they're 2-8. They've dropped to the 7th seed in the Western Conference when at one point they were a top 2 seed. And they're tied right now with the Wolves and the Clippers all the way down at the 8 and the 9 spots. They're just half a game ahead of the Lakers at the 10, just 1.5 games ahead of the Spurs at 11, and just 2 games ahead of the Kings at the 12 seed. So they've rapidly descended a little bit more towards the range that I thought they would end up in, even though overall in the season they've been better than I was expecting. They're for sure coming back down to earth. And a big reason has been the same problem that we saw in the offseason. They don't have a second guy next to Steph. Now, I will say Steph Curry has declined. He is no longer a top 5 player in the world. He's not a top 2 guard in the sport. It was always going to happen. I mean, he's 36 years old. That's fine. But he's still been really good. He's putting up right under 23 points per game, and that's despite his shot attempts being down. He's deferring a lot more, which has led to just under 7 dimes per game. He's shooting 42% from 3. Probably one of the biggest issues for him has been crunch time, or last year and over the past few seasons, really his whole career, he's always been one of the clutchest players in the sport. This season, it's really not gone his way, and I think adding more offensive talent around him would help that out a lot. But for the most part, Steph has been great, and that is shown in the offensive rating when he's on the court. The Warriors have a 122.2 offensive rating, which would put them at the top of the NBA, and a 9.2 net rating overall. The problem is when he's off the court, that net rating drops to a negative 1.7, and the offense falls to a 104.7, which would be only above the Wizards as the 29th best in the NBA. It is a monumental regression when you don't have Steph Curry out there. The team just cannot put together consistent offense whatsoever, and you've seen the offense. That's been the main thing that's taken a big dip over the course of this season, to the point where they're about middle of the pack now when they were at one moment in that top 10. So the Warriors really need some help on that end. Somebody has to be there to help elevate the offense when Steph Curry's on the bench, and that's where a second star would really go ahead and help you because, for example, I'm a Thunder fan. Shea, when he goes to the bench, the team is worse for sure, but then Jalen Williams comes in and he can run stuff, and you also have Isaiah Hartenstein to set some screens, and Chet Holmgren, when he's healthy, helps out too. The Warriors really don't have guys like that. Draymond can do a lot in terms of the dribble handoffs and setting things up, but he's not that elite level guard that can create shots for himself the way that a Steph Curry can, or a number of other second options in the league. Like the Suns have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, or the Mavericks have Kyrie Irving to go ahead and help out Luka. And I'm not saying they have to get a second option at the level of some of those guys, but really anybody would make a massive difference. You're still expecting a 36-year-old Steph Curry to single-handedly elevate this offense. It's just not realistic whatsoever, and the young guys that they were banking on to help him out have not produced. Jonathan Kuminga Kuminga has been really solid as of late. He's getting his feet under him, and he just had like a 20-piece against the Mavericks. He has some good shooting nights here and there, but he's nowhere near consistent enough to be their second option. And honestly, I'm not even sure if he's going to be here past this season, even past this trade deadline, because they're going to have to pay him over the course of this summer. And again, the fit feels clunky with him on this roster. I don't know if they feel comfortable with paying him. We'll have to wait and see on that front. So that's one guy that maybe you instead could have dealt for a second option that you held on to, and it's not working out in your favor now. And probably the bigger offender here is Brandin Podziemski, who they really were banking on being that second option, the replacement for Klay Thompson, a guy that could elevate his game a ton. They saw him as maybe not an all-star this season, but as a future all-star, and maybe he can still get to that point someday. But in my opinion, they put way too much expectation on him. It was unrealistic to think that he could take such a big jump in the course of one summer. After last season, he had a pretty good rookie season, but it wasn't like he was a borderline all-star last year. He was just pretty good, and now he's hit a big-time sophomore slump. All of his efficiency way down. He looks much less confident. He's hesitant out there. There was one play against the Mavericks where he got trapped by Luka in the corner completely and ended up getting blocked, just chucking up a three because he had no more time. He didn't know what to do. He's just not ready for this type of responsibility. And that's fine. He's a young player, and I think they just expected way too much out of him and a lot of these young guys, kind of how they've been doing for a majority of this era. Honestly, another good example of this is what happened with Jordan Poole, where he was an integral piece of their 2022 championship run, then he had that rough 2023, and they immediately went ahead and dealt him. Now, I know also part of that is the fact that he and Draymond Green had a lot of awkward tension after Draymond Green literally punched him in the face at a practice, and maybe in an alternate timeline where he doesn't sock him, Jordan Poole is still on this roster, or at least gets another chance. But I still feel like it was way too rushed. It was premature to deal away Jordan Poole, who was so good for you the season prior, in favor of a very old Chris Paul. And I'm a Chris Paul guy. If you've watched the channel, you know that. But it didn't end up working out. And then also last year, for some reason, they didn't trade an expiring Chris Paul's contract. They held on to it and just let him walk, which took away a lot of potential matching money to go out and get a star, which they needed last season and they especially need now. There's just been a lot of misplays over the course of the past few years from the Golden State Warriors. Ever since they won that 2022 title, I feel like they've made mostly wrong decisions. I mean, even before that last title, we could go all the way back to the 2020 draft, where they had a gift-wrapped opportunity to draft the successor to Steph Curry with LaMelo Ball, who over the course of this season with Charlotte has become an all-NBA level guard. He's putting up like 30 points per game right now. Imagine what he could have done under the tutelage of Steph Curry in that Golden State Warriors system. It would have been ridiculous. Steph might have 6 rings at this point if they drafted LaMelo Ball. You want to talk about a second option, a guy that could elevate the offense when Steph's not on the court? That is that exact type of player. But instead, they drafted James Wiseman and just completely threw away the opportunity to have a real modern, like Spurs having David Robinson, but still getting Tim Duncan type moment. And I know I'm talking down on an organization that found a way to be one of the most prolific dynasties in modern American sports history, but still, you have Steph Curry right now. He is once again a top 10 player, in my opinion, the second best point guard to ever play the game. It doesn't matter. He is a generational player. He is the best player in your franchise history. When you have a player of that talent, even though he's 36 years old right now, you owe it to him to try to be highly competitive in any way that you can. And maybe the Warriors truly thought this was the best route, but I believe they are worried about what their future is going to look like after Steph Curry. And I'm going to break it to them now. It doesn't matter. If you trade Brandin Podziemski, if you hold on to him, and same thing with Kuminga, those guys are not going to elevate you to still be a hyper-competitive team once Steph retires. When he retires, the Warriors are going to go into hibernation for quite some time. That's just the way it goes. I mean, they have extended this run way longer than I think anybody thought. When they won that first title back in 2015, if you said that they would win a title 7 years later with like the same main core group of guys, you would have been called crazy, because that's insane in basketball. It doesn't happen, especially in the modern era. Very few franchises ever manage to evade irrelevance for that period of time. It only happens when you have one of those once-in-a-lifetime type players, and that's what they have in Steph Curry. And you have a chance to maintain relevance even further, so make trades. And I'll give them credit, they at least added Dennis Schroder over the last few days, and I do think he's going to be a fun fit over there. He gives them an interesting dynamic, because this team runs no pick and rolls like at all, and Schroder's been really good running pick and roll over the past few seasons, so I hope that is something that they go ahead and try out, let him utilize that skill set. Otherwise, he's going to be wasted as an acquisition. So I like that they're trying to make moves, moves, but Dennis Schroder isn't moving the needle. He's not getting you up there and competing with the best of the best in the NBA. You need to add another star, maybe even multiple players. You have to really change up this roster. In my opinion, their chance was this summer. It doesn't feel like they're going to be able to make anything nearly as monumental happen throughout the course of this season with the new CBA and the way that they're currently structured and that their roster looks. It's just not happening. Like, Brandin Podziemski's value is so much lower now than it was in the summer, with Kuminga having to be paid this offseason, not getting a full year to really evaluate him. I'm sure franchises also value him a little bit less. They've just wasted a lot of the trade value of those young guys. They wasted last year, Steph Curry. They're wasting this year. They've just got to do better as a franchise. We'll see if they go ahead and make those moves that are necessary. I don't anticipate them doing so. I think they kind of just stay put. It's just a tough star market right now, which is why you have to make those moves in the summer. Like, Jimmy Butler is the biggest name available, but to make the money work, you really have to gut a lot of your roster. And I don't know if an aging Jimmy Butler is the answer. Lowry can't be traded this season because he got extended. Is it like a Zach LaVine you go after, Nikola Vucevic? Those guys move the needle a little bit, but not nearly as much as some of the other options that were out there. So yeah, we'll have to see what the Warriors do. Again, I like that they added Dennis Schroder, but I think overall they're wasting Steph Curry. They're wasting the last few great years of one of the best players that I will ever see play the game of basketball, and that really sucks. But anyways, that's all I've got. Let me know down below what you think about this situation. What moves would you make? Do you think I'm overreacting? Do you think that they're doing the right thing by being patient, holding on to this young core? Should they go all in for Steph Curry? What is your thought? If you were the Warriors general manager, what would you do throughout the season and going into next summer? What would you have done this past summer? I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.